We're already a handful of months into 2025, and there are so many great films that might have just slipped under your radar thus far. Here are 6 that I think are more than worth your time. This is the debut film from Carson Lund, who you might know as the DP on the films of Tyler Taormina, like Ham on Rye and last year's Christmas Eve in Miller's Point. And his film, EEPHUS, feels very much within the same realm as those. It follows the course of a small-town pickup baseball game throughout one autumn afternoon, on the very last day before their beloved ball field is set to be torn down. The film's title is borrowed from a type of baseball pitch that is intentionally thrown with a high arc and at an extremely slow velocity so as to catch batters by surprise and disrupt their timing. The movie itself, like this titular pitch, is very slow and gentle, as leisurely paced as the seminal American pastime itself. The film uses a pretty obvious metaphor at its center, and yet it works, and makes for something incredibly charming and moving. Lund has crafted a really shaggy hangout movie and an illogic look at the passage of time, and the tight bonds formed between men that just wouldn't exist beyond the boundaries of the diamond. It's kinda like if Bad News Bears was directed by Tsai Ming-liang. Haley Elizabeth Anderson's TENDABERRY premiered all the way back at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival, and I immediately fell in love with its unique take on the coming-of-age narrative. As this is a very ambitious first feature that merges various forms and devices, narrative, documentary, archival material, to form a dazzling portrait of a 23-year-old Dominican-American woman's life. It's told across 4 parts that elliptically trace her family and friendships, her romantic relationships and jobs, her past, present, and future life. Anderson's filmmaking is incredibly intimate, with lively handheld cinematography and frequent voiceover that keys us directly into the thoughts and feelings of our young protagonist, affording us the opportunity to really inhabit her existence. I'd say TENDABERRY is like a filmic diary or scrapbook of sorts, that looks at personal memory as a record of movement and change, but one that is valuable and can be steadily altered by time. The film can feel like a scattershot of ideas, but ultimately TENDABERRY really marks the emergence of a singular new voice that adeptly understands how to capture images so charged with feeling and meaning. The film is currently available on most digital platforms, but will be available to stream on Mubi on April 25th. Almost 2 years after its festival premiere, Canadian auteur Adam Egoyan's latest and best film since 2009's Chloe has now finally seen a release in the States. Seven Veils centers on Janine, a theater director played by Amanda Seyfried, who is given the task of remounting her now-deceased mentor's production of the prestigious opera Salome. The restaging, initially an assignment from the mentor's widow, gradually reveals itself to be an exercise in reclaiming her pain. This is naturally very ripe material for Egoyan, whose signature career-long obsession has been about how past traumas inform and bleed into a present life. And here he doles these themes out using a jumble of glossy digital cinematography, iPhone recordings, archival videos, and low-grade camcorder footage. There's also this steady dose of self-reflexivity to Seven Veils, as Egoyan himself remounted Salome for the Canadian Opera Company in 2023. His production singers are playing fictionalized versions of themselves, and the film even has a sort of behind-the-scenes feel to it. This absolutely won't work for everyone, but it's the kind of brutally honest, confrontational filmmaking that is so few and far between. It's the perfect spiritual successor to what I think is his finest work in Exotica, even though some of the creative choices made here aren't nearly as strong as others. In Christopher Andrews' feature debut Bring Them Down, we are served up a dour Irish thriller starring 2 of our finest young actors, in Barry Keoghan and Christopher Abbott. Set amid the verdant but desolate Irish countryside, Andrews constructs an unrelenting fable of desperate men whose feuding entangles 2 families in an increasingly violent back and forth. Using Kurosawa's Rashomon perspective-shifting approach, we are met with various, sometimes contradictory perspectives on the events of the narrative, getting to experience a set of events with one character before shifting perspectives and reliving it through an entirely new set of eyes. This is a persistently grim, unkind watch that wants you to sit in the muck of its violence and misery, every moment so induced with a palpable sense of anger and hostility. Bring Them Down is one of those rock-solid, downer kind of watches that acts as a really promising debut feature, with a smartly constructed screenplay and a cool inversion of the thriller genre, one that finds thrills in the gloom and desolation of the Irish countryside. Misericordia is a tricky one. It was my introduction to the work of French filmmaker Alain Guiriardi, probably best known for 2013's Stranger by the Lake, and boy what an introduction this was. The film is a queer noir that boasts erotic tension, murder, and Catholic guilt, and the telling of the return of a young baker named Jeremy to a remote countryside village in South France for the funeral of his beloved former boss. There, he is greeted by the dead man's widow and her brutish son, who usher him back into his hometown until a violent encounter throws everything into disarray, and he must seek out the help of a local priest. This is a twisty-turny, part thriller, part farce that is played in a gleefully dry register, of which is shockingly hypnotic until the very last frame. We've also got master cinematographer Claire Mathon behind the camera here, doing her thing as always, beautifully capturing overcast skies and autumnal landscapes. This is a film that upends any and all expectations you might have going into it. I thought I was in for a dreary, queer French film, and instead left with a visual gag scorched deep into my memory from how hard it made me laugh. Ghiriardi has himself a new fan, and I'm excited to delve deep into his filmography. Winner of last year's Best Director prize in the Uncertain Regards sidebar of Cannes, Rungarno Niani's wonderful new film follows a young woman named Shula who happens upon the dead body of her uncle Fred on an empty road one night. She then has to help her family organize his funeral, thrusting herself into the surreal and absurd nature of Zambian grieving rituals. The movie plays in this very off-kilter register that is going to turn many off of it almost immediately. But if you're on its same wavelength, you will be enchanted by it. Naoni's combination of heavy drama with surrealist comedy is so impressively balanced, understanding that life is full of absurd and horrific moments. The characters in her film act and grieve in mysterious ways, but that is not done without any rhyme or reason, as the film gradually reveals why each character is acting and processing events in such strange ways. It's funny at times, melancholy and surreal in others, but it's all rooted in the horror of facing trauma head-on, as a family, where in the face of death, you attempt to remain steadfast in tradition and not disturb the balance of the family unit, but knowing you're gonna lose, and eventually gain back, bits and pieces of yourself along the way. It's a real fearless piece of filmmaking, and I'm thrilled to see where Nioni goes from here. It is bar none the most criminally underseen film of 2025 thus far.